the magazine up here. These mats, the magazine has to be a little bit higher than this plate, so when the mats come out, they can drop off on this plate. There's an adjustment right here that raises the magazine above it. So if you're working on this magazine, you'll have to make this adjustment. If I was adjusting this magazine, I'd have to raise it up and do the one that's underneath this. But there's one on each side, so you can raise the magazine up or down. And it has to be to where the mats can drop off onto this without hitting this. If they hit this plate and drag, then they either won't fall out, or they'll hit it and they just won't come out at all, or they'll come out slowly. Now, the other thing that has to be done is, again, the partitions in here. You have these partitions, so the magazine has to be left to right so that it doesn't hit on a partition. It has to rub right beside it. So to make that adjustment, right down in here, there's a screw and a nut right there. See that? Right down here. Okay, there's one on each side. There's one right here. It's the same thing. Right there. That's for the top magazine. That's for the second magazine. What you have to do is, depending on which way you want the magazine to go, you have to loosen one side and tighten the other to shift the magazine left or right. And I'll have to leave you to figure that out, which one you have to do, because I can't tell you right now. So that's the adjustment for adjusting the magazines so that they fall properly. Down here, you have a screw right here, a little tiny screw right there, and a nut that adjusts your gate out or in. And actually, this is the one that you want to adjust your gate with right here at this point, because your mats fall in. And you want them to be a little bit free back and forth, but not real sloppy free. It's kind of a feel thing. You want them to move back and forth so that they will assemble properly and easily. Then over here is an adjustment. When you raise the magazine, it drops in a little bit so that they tighten the mats so they don't fall over on their way up. So this moves the gate in or out just a little bit, and this holds it in one position. Okay. Now this piece right here, that's the latch. So when you take it up, it'll latch on a piece in here and hold it just long enough so your mats can transfer out of this. So they transfer out of the assembler elevator, because if it went up without that, it would just drop back down and all your mats would fall out. So it has to stay up here long enough to drop it out. Then as this goes by, it hits it and it drops it off what it's latched to. This wire is what starts the transfer process. It goes up through a hole, and then there's a piece up here that it hits. Let's see, where is that? It hits a piece right here, and it trips this lever right up here, because this lever is what's holding it right now, that lever. So it knocks that lever up. When it knocks that lever up, it makes the transfer process start to go across. All right, next part of the cycle. The delivery slide comes across. It'll come to this. This is an adjustment here to adjust where it sets in the channel when it comes across. But when it comes across, there's an arm back here that hits your release mechanism on this cam. And the release mechanism is what starts the machine cycling automatically. When I'm pulling the clutch out, I'm doing the same thing. I'm hitting the release mechanism in the back. So then it goes around, and when it gets up here to this position, there's another mechanism on there that's the same as the first release mechanism that stops it for these to go across. When the mats go all the way across, then that mechanism releases and lets it continue its cycle all the way up until it stops again and you start the whole process over. This is the clutch mechanism that makes the whole machine move. There's a leather right here and a leather on that end. And whenever I pull that handle up front, those spread out and those leathers lock into this wheel that's revolving all the time. And then what those start-stop levers are doing, that's moving that in and out to stop it. If they move it out, it pulls the leathers away from the wheel. And when I pull it, when it starts going again, they kick back into the wheel and then they start turning. Because that's what's actually moving the whole machine, is that piece right there. This pin releases it to begin with, starts a cycle. It goes over to this mechanism, over into the jaws, which releases a mechanism in the back, the stop. It's called a start-stop lever, and it releases the stop lever and puts it in start position. It lets the machine start cycling. When it gets up here, it actually stops to let these go across. Once they're across, same thing happens. It hits the second release and then lets it continue its cycle. If you push this in, it stops the process right here because this finger never comes across. So it'll stop right there and not release in the back. So it's just sitting there until you release this arm and let it go across and do its thing. All the normal mats go all the way across the distributor bar and they fall down in the channels they're supposed to fall into. Now the pie mats with all the teeth in them will go all the way across and they'll drop into this chute and come down and they'll put them back here so you can put them in. Pie mats are usually mats like accents and special characters that do not fit in the magazine. So they'll come down here, and whenever you need one, you just have to pull it out here and put it in by hand. These are called side knives. And what they do is, this is what you're setting when I'm adjusting this handle. I set it to 10 point, 12 point, 14 point, whatever the width of your slug is. You're moving this knife in or out. This knife on this side stays stationary all the time and stays constant. But by moving this in, it trims your slug to the correct thickness so that all your slugs are the same that come out and they're straight. So these are side knives. Sometimes they get dull, sometimes they get worn out, and they have to be changed. Right in here is the back trim knife. That's what trims the back of the slug so that all the slugs are the same exact height, so that there's not one taller than the other or shorter than the other, so that they will all print and print evenly. And that print height is 0.918. That's the standard print height here in the U.S. Other countries have 0.928, 0.926, different measurements. But 0.928 is here in the U.S., and that's what this back knife is doing. And it sometimes has to be adjusted to get that. And once you adjust it, and as long as you keep it sharp, it usually stays that way for 6-8 months or a year. I mean, you don't have to do it all the time, but if you do have to change it, then you might get a knife that's shorter or taller, and so you'll have to do another adjustment on it because they're not all the same height after they've been sharpened. All of this is in the Linotype Machine Principles. Again, I recommend everybody get a copy of that book. That is the Bible for this machine. And it has all of this stuff that I just went over in that, but you got to read to find it. It's not on YouTube like this is going to be. So look in the book. It has illustrations and it has real words that you can read and explains how everything works.